I'm super excited about this. Welcome back to Office Hours. I know we've been waiting for some time to get this back on the books, and what better way than with my good friend, longtime collaborator, favorite podcast host. Um, I could go on and on. Dana, the founder and CEO of Chip Professionals. For you guys who are not familiar with Dana, she is amazing. Has asked the best questions, has the best podcast, and is one of my favorite entrepreneurs overall. So I'm really excited for us to be in partnership with the Chip Professionals, and for this event this evening and more to come. And thank you to Anna as well. Of course, we could not have done this without you and your expertise that you are about to, and these gems that you are about to drop on the community. I'm very excited about this. So again, thank you, Dana. And I will hand it over to you, but I'm just excited to be here.
Well, I appreciate it. And thank you for all of that. I mean, equally sentiment shared in all ways. So really excited to kick off this partnership. I'm excited about this financial series that will continue throughout the year, and beyond. Of course, now more than ever, this is, extremely important conversations, for everyone. It is top of mind. Regardless of what's going on in your personal, professional life, this is a time to really be understanding your money, talking about it, taking that power back around it. So we wanted to make sure that we brought this financial series and brought experts like Anna to the table to talk to you about all the things that you could be doing right now that can really help either get you started, continue to enhance the strategies that you've already put in place. Anna has been in the industry for, a very long time, has great expertise in all subject matter around wealth planning, wealth building, investments, strategy, even how to manage, your business, personal life, and kind of intertwine all of that within your unique financial situation. So there is no better expert that I'm excited to kick off this series with than Anna. So Anna, welcome, and thank you
Dana.
for all of what you do in the industry and all of what you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here with y'all, Rashad. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for having me. I am keeping things real high level today. I'm always open for questions. So I'm going to plan to present for a portion of the time. And then after that, we are going to do some Q&A. If y'all have some, feel free to engage in the chat and let me know whatever questions you have. Okay. So before I get into um, my presentation, I just want to give you all a sense of who I am and what I do. My name is Ananya Conte. I am the founder of Poder Wealth Advisors, a wealth management firm that is really centered on helping women of color to invest and grow their wealth that is going to help them facilitate living their best lives. I've been in the industry for about 15 years, the last 5 of which have been an independent wealth management capacity. So I've seen it all in terms of the industry, and I have a lot of perspective on kind of different business models and different ways that people do things, right, when it comes to wealth management. I also just want to share a little bit more of my personal background. So I grew up in New York City, really humble beginnings. I worked 2 or 3 jobs growing up. I'm sorry, my parents worked 2 and 3 jobs growing up. And I really experienced a lot of financial lack. I really had no financial education, no financial literacy, no clue as to what I was doing financially, because nobody in my family did. Our thoughts around financial planning were, can I make it to next month? Can I afford this payment? Can we take the luxury of like getting takeout today because we have these other things, or go to the movies because we, maybe have a little bit of extra money? And so when I first started working in wealth management, it was really a huge culture shock to me. And so I really spent the first 10 years of my career just trying to absorb all of that, right? Like I was just a sponge. I want to learn everything. These people think about wealth in such a different way. And my mission now is really to help take that knowledge and that way of thinking from that I learned in like these rooms where I'm talking to people who have $200 million net worth, $100 million net worth, and $20 million net worth. And not to say that all of those things are applicable, but I think that the mindset and the perspective and so much of the knowledge that they have can be really helpful for you all, especially I think in this time that we're living in, when there's a lot of uncertainty, when there's a lot of volatility. Um, so that's me. And really my mission is just to help you all have the tools that you need to build long-lasting, secure, and really think strategically about your wealth. All right, so first things first. Now, I know that, I don't have a ton of information around whether you all are entrepreneurs, whether your age range and all of that, but I wanted to give you some universal truths that I think are going to be really helpful. And the way I structured this presentation was to give you a sense of how I like to think about wealth on a macro level and what are some of the things you want to think about if you're a little bit earlier on in your journey or you're a little bit later on your journey. And you may be somewhere smack dab in between, but I figured giving you sort of the poles and the more extremes would be helpful. But before we get into tactics, first things first, I want us to think about how we think about money, because one of the things that I'll share with you that was the biggest game changer for me when I went into wealth management was how people thought about money. You see, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of my family was like thinking hand to mouth. And even if they did a little bit better, they were thinking very small and they were lugging around all of their financial trauma and baggage and habits that were not serving them. And I think one of the things that we can do at the very least is heal our relationship to money so that we can have a more positive or at the very least neutral relationship with money so that we can manage it effectively. Because a lot of times what happens is we are letting these thoughts around money and our money mindset run the show. And one of my mentors says that when our mind is not managed, when our mind is not examined, when our perspective and our beliefs and our thoughts around things are not examined, it's like a toddler running around with a kitchen knife. Like you would not let, Rashad, you were just saying you're playing dad. Like if your 3-year-old had a kitchen knife running around, you would be really worried. And that's what our brain does a little bit when it comes to thoughts around money. So when we think about, and this applies to any thoughts, but obviously this is a talk about finances. We have these thoughts around money. Now, these may be positive or negative, right? It might be like debt is bad. That's a real common one. And I'd love to hear some in the chat, some that you may have personally, some things that you may think about money. Money is hard for me to learn. Um, rich people are bad. Rich people are evil and selfish. You may have thoughts around how much is a lot of money to earn, or how much is enough to earn, how much is not enough to earn. And the truth is, like, there may be a kernel of reality in there, but it's really about your thoughts, right? And becoming more neutral around the thought around money. Those thoughts around money really fuel your feelings around money. So this is going to be like how you feel in your body, how you feel emotionally when I mention the word debt, when I mention a credit card, when I mention rich people, when I mention um, entrepreneurship, what comes up for you? And those feelings, if we are not mindful of those thoughts and mindful of those feelings, a lot of times that drives your action. So I don't know, we all have things that we react to, right? And we may react to a situation, you have some road rage. You're probably not really mad at the guy that cut you off at the stop sign. You're probably really upset about that conversation that you need to have with your boss and you haven't had. But we have a reaction, right? And that reaction has a result. And so when we think about money, I'm going to take a really common one, like debt is bad. So if I have the thought that debt is bad, then anytime I find myself in a situation with debt, whether it's healthy, whether it's productive or not, whether it's low interest, high interest, regardless of the financial facts of it, like the numbers, the nuts and bolts of it, I'm probably going to feel really bad. I'm going to feel really insecure. I might not be able to sleep. I might feel anxious. I might feel uncertain. And so sometimes what that means is we will either avoid our finances because we feel shame or anxiety around the debt. We may say YOLO and just really go hard because I'm already horrible with money and I gotten myself into debt and debt's a problem. And so I'm just, the debt's going to be around forever and I'm just going to keep it there and I'm not going to address it. Or you may go really ham like Dave Ramsey and say, I'm going to pay all of this off immediately. Like I have to go all in, and you ignore the other aspects of your life, your financial life, in order to be able to pay that off. And that leads to a result, right? So you ignore your money because you feel shame about your debt, and that leads to you getting in more debt or paying more in interest than you need to, or missing payments. That affects your credit, right? Like those are all of the things that kind of feed into it. And that result, so especially if it's a negative one, in this case, if you have a really negative feeling or thought around debt, then and you feel anxious about it, you ignore it, you get late payments, your credit gets jacked up, then that's a reinforcing result that reinforces your thought that debt is bad. When meanwhile, it's your relationship to it, it's your lack of attention to it, it's your actions with it that are causing that. Let me know if that resonates with you all, or if you have any thoughts or questions too. Now I want to talk about the results cycle with finances, right? So how you think about money. I've already talked to y'all about that. So how you think about money. That leads to your daily financial habits. Okay. So for example, if I think that my goal is to save as much as possible, right? Like I need to be really frugal. Then my daily habits are probably going to be that I am not going to allow myself to spend any money. I'm not going to allow myself to spend money. I'm going to feel really anxious and second guess every purchase that I make. My financial results are probably not going to be bad in this case, right? Like I'm probably going to have a good amount of money in savings. Maybe I feel really anxious about the market though. So like maybe I'm putting a lot into savings and I'm not investing a lot. That impacts your long-term financial health, right? You're if you're overly scared, you're overly frugal, you're overly scared of investing, like you don't want to lose any money or you don't want to spend too much because you're afraid and you're living in scarcity, then that probably is going to hinder your long-term financial health because your money's not invested and it's not growing, right? We always want our money to be working as hard as we do. And that's one of the things I tell my clients all the time. That leads to an impact on your quality of life. Like think about, I'll tell y'all the story. I have an aunt of mine who was, most of my family was and is not good with money whatsoever. My aunt was the lone exception, and she was never rich, but she was really stable. She was dogged about spending less money than she made. Like she was really mindful and monitored her spending down to the penny. And my aunt died really suddenly a couple years ago. And when she died, I was so sad because I found all of these composition notebooks. I was helping my mom and my uncle, excuse me, go through her things and look for her paperwork and all of that stuff. And I looked through it and she was logging in those composition notebooks every single thing she spent. I mean, she spent $2.50 somewhere. She was going to write it down. Okay. And this is a woman who died with a completely paid off house, maybe, $300,000, 400,000, had a pension and Social Security, and like one of those good pensions, right? Like not like the ones people have today or the non-existent ones, like a really solid one, Social Security, and maybe $100,000 in a 401k. She could have afforded to not stress over $2. She could have afforded to take the trips that she always said she wanted to, and nothing luxurious. Like she just wanted to get on the Amtrak and see the fall foliage in New England in the Northeast. That's not a crazy endeavor. She could have easily afforded it. She could have probably paid for it from her monthly cash flow, but she didn't. And the thing I just want y'all to understand is that this money mindset is running the show. So a lot of times we end up chasing wealth, we end up chasing money, we end up chasing numbers that are not rooted in reality and are being driven and what our actual needs are and are being driven by this subconscious programming, right? And that affects how we show up day to day. It affects how we enjoy ourselves. And so, if you're an entrepreneur, I see this all the time. People are shooting for revenue levels that are completely divorced from the reality of what they actually need personally. They're shooting for um portfolio levels or like income levels that are completely divorced from what their actual needs are and their actual lifestyle is. And I just want to share that it's really important that you do this work. And so one exercise I'm going to leave y'all with is um, I tell my clients to sit down with a legal pad, piece of paper, pen, and write down all of your money memories and ask yourself, like from early age, like as your earliest memories to now, and think about like if it was positive, it was negative, if it really sticks with you or stuck with you, think about what you've made that mean and think about the behaviors that you exhibit now, the habits that you exhibit now, the actions that you take now that are related to that. And you'd be shocked, completely shocked at what you find. I have a client who I've worked with who is incredibly successful. But she grew up very poor. And as in, she never had her own clothes. All her clothes were hand-me-downs or Goodwill kind of thing, food stamps, evictions, like the 9 yards. She grew up with a single mom. And she's doing really well now. She has kids. And this woman struggled for so long to say no to anything for her kids. So she was spending thousands of dollars a month, thousands of dollars a month on anything her kids wanted, on Target, on figure skating, on like travel gymnastics, on, gadgets and Sephora and stuff. And the problem with that was she was doing it from this like old trauma response that she had with money. And it wasn't actually in alignment with what her financial goals were. She was undersaving for her own retirement and her own financial independence. And it wasn't actually giving her the lifestyle that she wanted. And it wasn't instilling the values that she wanted with her children. And so that's a concrete example of sometimes we're doing things on autopilot and we're not really paying attention. Okay. Um, Alrighty. So I want to talk to y'all about, now that we talked about money mindset, I want to talk to y'all about my basic perspective on how we want to think about wealth. And this is the sustainable wealth pyramid. This is like my own framework that I use. And I structured it as a pyramid because we can't build a pyramid from the pointy side down, right? We have to start with the foundation. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that people make is they try to implement strategies that are not meant for their level. If you're at level 10, or sorry, if you're at level 3, you cannot implement level 10 strategies. And you actually could, but is it worth it? Is it appropriate? Can you afford it? Do you have the right parameters in place now to make that make sense? Sometimes you don't. And a lot of times what we see as catastrophe or like people really hitting rock bottom financially is because they don't have these things done in order or they don't have the fundamentals down. So we're going to go through that. So let's talk about protection. Okay. So when we're thinking about protection, it is exactly what it means. I like to be really clear and plain. So if you're a beginner investor, if you're just getting started on your journey, you want to think about 3 areas primarily. You want to think about positive cash flow. This is the lifeblood of your finances. If you do not spend less than you earn, if you do not have an amount on a monthly basis that is left, and I don't even like actually leftover is not, that is strategically allocated for your wealth building, you're not going to get anywhere fast. Because what a lot of us do at the beginning stages is we try and say, hey, I'm going to just earn money, right? Like I'm going to earn more money, I'm going to earn more money, I'm going to earn more money, and when I earn more money, then I'll save money or then I'll invest more. And that is a problem because even if, and listen, I've been there. My first job out of college, I think I earned $25,000 a year. Like Nothing. I remember distinctly my paycheck was like $800 every 2 weeks for a 40-hour work week. Okay. So I was working a lot and not earning very much at all. So I understand like the realities of when you're first starting out in your career, you may not be earning very much. But the point is to build the habit and to understand, hey, even if it's $50, even if it's $100, even if it's $75 a month, I am going to get in the habit of making sure that I protect that positive cash flow with my life. That is the thing that's going to save you because it's going to allow you to save for your emergency fund. I know y'all hear about this. It's not very sexy. It's not very fancy, but this is the thing that keeps the floor from falling out from under you when you lose a job, when, there's a sickness in your family. I've seen it all, and the emergency fund is what protects you there. So you want to think about what are the expenses that you'd have to pay just for being alive? Okay. My daughter recently said to me, she's like, it's crazy that human beings are the only people that have to pay just to live, or the only animals that have to pay just to live. This is not like she's becoming aware of all of these things and she is not about it. And I feel her. But at the end of the day, we live in the society that we live in. We live in the way that we live in a capitalist society. And so you want to think about like, what is it going to take to keep you alive? Your rent, your mortgage, your minimum debt payments, groceries, utilities, light bills. That's the number you want to do, right? If you think about if you have a crisis, let's say you lose your job. There's a lot of layoffs and uncertainty happening right now. You lose your job, you're probably not going to be going on vacation, right? You're probably not going to be going out to eat every weekend or going to the bar with your friends or going to brunch. You're probably not going to do that. So you want to think about that bare minimum. And then you want to target 3 to 6 months of those expenses. Put that in a separate savings account, high yield savings account, and have that be untouchable. Okay. And then the last thing I want to say is get adequate life and long-term disability insurance. Like you can get some very affordable term life insurance. And the thing about it is you may have a significant, like a spouse. You may even be thinking about starting a family. I personally think that as soon as you have, or you may have like parents that depend on you, or you anticipate are going to depend on you, that's the time that you want to get that insurance in place. Because if something happens to you and there's someone that depends on you, they are not going to fare very well without you being around. And you also want to think about long-term disability insurance, right? Because the younger you are, the cheaper it is. That is one thing that I wish I would have done sooner. I really, really, really wish I would have bought some long-term disability insurance when I was younger because it would have been so much cheaper. And this is really going to replace your income. So if something happens to you, let's say you get in a car crash and you can't work for 6 months. Let's say you have a diagnosis of some sort of illness and you have to, you have cancer, you got to go to chemo. This is going to pay you, depending on the policy, usually 60% of your income on a monthly basis because you bought that policy. Okay. And so this is really just, once again, keeping the floor out from under you. All right, if you're an experienced investor, we want to think about life insurance and long-term disability needs. If you bought life insurance in your 20s or your early 30s and now you're in your 40s and 50s, it may not be appropriate. Or you may not have a need because maybe the people that you were financially supporting or were financially dependent upon you no longer need you. And so you may not need it. You may also want to think about your long-term disability needs. To be honest, actually, I didn't include this, but now that I'm thinking about it, you may want to think about long-term care insurance as well. And there's some really great options that will, offer like life insurance and long-term care insurance benefits that I really like, that I recommend to my clients usually, where, if you don't want to just have a policy that you may or may not use, and you have it like you just have one policy and it can be used for either. Maybe it's time to update your estate plan to include a revocable living trust or fund an existing trust. A lot of people, when you have a really simple financial situation, you don't have any dependents, you don't have anything really crazy, you can just get away with your basic estate plan. Your wills, your healthcare directive, living will, HIPAA authorization, power of attorney. Like you can get away with that and that's completely fine. But once you start to build more assets, once you have a little bit more complexity, that's when you really want to think about like having more advanced trust structures just to avoid probate and just to make ease of administration should you become ill, should you pass away for your loved ones, right? And then you just want to ensure you have adequate asset protection. So just make sure that things are titled right. Make sure that you have appropriate like liability insurance. If you own rental properties, like that's one thing I know a lot of folks do once they've been, at actively building their wealth for a couple of years, like they may not have appropriate umbrella insurance or appropriate policies on their rentals. And so you just want to look and make sure that all of that is set up appropriately so that you are protected. All right, let's talk about growing. This is the part that everybody wants to get to. This is what everybody wants to talk about. When you're thinking about growing your wealth, which is that middle section of the pyramid, that's the fuel that makes the plan go, right? A lot of us may feel timid about investing, and I just want to say we are living in a time where we have the most access to investments at the lowest cost or no cost ever. There's more access to information, there's more investment products than ever. And I really feel as though this is like the best time for beginner investors to get their feet wet and to get in there because the bar to entry is so low. When I was coming up, you would have to pay $75 a trade for a mutual fund, right? You would have to pay sometimes $50 a trade for something, $100 a trade. And so, if I want to set up a plan to build wealth on a monthly basis and I have to pay $75 a trade, and I'm not even investing all that much, like it's not gonna work very well for me. But that stuff does, very exists very sparingly. And there are a lot of low cost or no cost options. So this is something that I just really emphasize to people is like there's so much information out there. Be careful where you get your information. There's a lot of information out there. So when you're just getting started, you want to think about contributing to a 401k. 10 to 15% plus your employer match is a great place to be in. Fantastic place. If you can do more, do more. If you can only do the match, then that's still great. But I would say stretch yourself to do the 10 to 15% because the thing about earning more money is, or like having more disposable cash flow is, you get used to that. And if you start early, start contributing early, it also buys you a lot of freedom. Personally, I started investing really aggressively for my retirement very early because I was in this environment and I took it a little overboard. I'm not gonna lie to y'all. I was trying to max out my retirement when I was earning like $50,000 a year. Like, what was I talking about? That was not an easy thing to do, and it was a little bit overdoing it. But that's one of the things that helped me, though. On the flip side, it helped me feel really comfortable to leave my very well-paid job and become an entrepreneur because I knew that I was very well ahead of where I needed to be for my age and for where my expenses were than what I needed to be. And so I knew that if I didn't contribute to my retirement for several years, I was going to be fine. Like I was going to be 100% fine. And that's the kind of position that I would love all of you all in because at the end of the day, the flexibility is so crucial in life. And the earlier you start, the more you're going to end up having. Consider a Roth IRA, depending on your income, depending on your situation. Like if you have extra cash flow after you do that 401k contributions, consider a Roth IRA. It's a great tool. And then key, because I know a lot of us like to just shove money in a savings account and leave it. Now, this is going to be a little bit of a controversial take because we want to buy a house one day, especially when you're young. I have a very strong countercultural opinion that nobody needs to be rushing to buy a house as their first financial move. I would much rather see you all invest aggressively in your 20s and 30s and then buy a house whenever you're ready, right? Because you can always invest that money and then take some of that and use it as a down payment. But what happens to a lot of us is we're told that the ultimate thing is to buy a home. Like once we have a good job and once we start working, it's like buy a home and then you get married and you have kids. That's the path that society tells us to go on. And people talk about real estate and like that's how you build wealth. You can build wealth a million different ways. Wealth is comprised of all the colors of the rainbow. It looks different. I've never seen two people's financial situation that was the same that were wealthy. They all get their different ways. But the one thing I know is that for a lot of us, and I'm speaking specifically for us, is we're coming from behind. And so if we sit and especially if we live in high cost of living areas, and we say, I'm going to save to put a 20% down payment on a $500,000 house, how long is that going to take you to save? It's going to probably take you multiple years, right? And so, how good would it be if you, instead of rushing to come up with $100,000 or $80,000 of a down payment, you said, I'm going to invest that money. Let's say it's $1,000 a month, $500 a month, whatever it is. I'm going to invest that money on a monthly basis, and I'm going to let that money grow. And I'm going to keep my expenses low, because usually in a lot of places, rent is cheaper than owning a home. I've been a homeowner. I'm a real estate investor. I get it. I know a home is a very expensive prospect, because if something's not breaking, you want to fix something and you want it to be cute and you want it to look better. And so you're going to Home Depot every weekend, or you're going to Home Goods and you're buying a lot of stuff and you're spending a ton of money that you actually may not need to do, right? So I really would encourage you to think, invest that money for as long as you want. And then maybe, when you get married and you have kids, you buy a house, or maybe you never buy a house. That's also valid. All I have to say is you'll usually end up much better in the long run, wealthier in the long run, if you follow that. So, take that little bit of countercultural advice. All right. Growing. If you're more experienced, you're a little older, you got kids, teen kids, right? A couple of things you want to think about. Establish, monitor, and manage those 529 for those kids, right? A lot of us have dealt with the scourge of student loans. Me too. Student loans are the worst, the absolute worst thing in the world. And I really want less of our kids to have those. And the key to that is to invest early in a 529. Get that money in there. You probably don't even have to contribute that much, and just monitor it, right? Because it has a shorter time horizon, right? You think if you establish it at birth and then they start college at 18, that's like 18 years, which in the scheme of investments is not really that long. But so you're going to have to monitor like that investment allocation and make sure that when that kid is going to college, that money is not overly aggressively invested. Because imagine right now the market is pretty substantially, let's call it high single digits, low double digits. I don't know where it closed at today. But if my kid were starting college next week, I just lost 10% of the value of that 529. That's not insignificant. And so as you get closer to needing that money, you really want to think about moving that allocation more conservatively. You want to check in on your general retirement readiness also, right? You want to think about, am I on track for retirement? Can I up my contributions to my investment accounts? Those of us, I'm a mother, so I get that these kids are very expensive. And I fully anticipate, and what I typically see is, once the kids get to a certain age, once they get through college, like you have a lot more disposable cash flow. And so instead of just being on autopilot, like really look at your situation and say, okay, how much can I afford to, or how much should I allocate towards these investment accounts? And then lastly, if you're a accredited investor, this may be the time where you consider like some alternative investment vehicles. That's something that you would, discuss with your financial advisor or your investment advisor and just see if that's appropriate for you. Okay, let's talk about enjoying yourself. Listen, I am the financial advisor that will tell you all to live your life. I am not the person, like it's actually a running joke with my friends, where if they want to take a trip or they want to buy something and they need someone to like give them the stamp of approval, they talk to me, which you wouldn't probably think that. But my friends will be like, I'm considering going to Paris. Like, book the ticket and let me know when we're going because I'll come too. That is me. So I just want to say that I think for a lot of young people, I can counter a lot of young people who are really committed to doing better in their finances. And one of the things that I find is that sometimes they're giving up life a little bit and they're overly concerned with the growth and the accumulation and saving and being frugal. And while I think those are incredible habits, like being financially focused and minded and being really intentional about where you spend your money and how you spend your money is a beautiful thing. chef's kiss. But you don't want to do that and then not live your life and not enjoy yourself because you're only young once. You probably are only going to be in that position where you don't have a lot of responsibilities at that phase of your life. And so I want you to enjoy that, right? So at the end of the day, I think you invest aggressively, but you live aggressively too. That's my motto. And then if you're more experienced, right? I think that one book that I love that I always recommend to folks that are, let's say, mid to late 40s and up is this book called Die with Zero, which is written by this brother who was a hedge fund manager and became a billionaire. So like, there's a little bit of a grain of salt there. But one of the things he talks about is the end game is not about accumulating the most money. The end game is to have a fulfilled life and have the experiences that you really want to have with the people that you love while they're still around. And so that requires a level of intentionality of, hey, instead of thinking about giving my kids a big inheritance, like let me give them the money sooner rather than later instead of worrying about, you know, saving every bit and maximizing wealth. Let me give it to them now, or let me have experiences with my kids while I'm still young and physically able instead of waiting for retirement or instead of waiting for some future date that may or may not come. Or you think about also like your health naturally declines as you get older. And so one of the things that I'm really focused on is or your parents, even if your health is fine and you have a really long time to live, your parents may be getting older and more unhealthy. And so now's the time you have to really realistically think like what's their life expectancy and what are the experiences that I want to have with my parents while they're still alive and healthy enough to do them and have fun and have it be feasible. And you want to spend your money strategically there. People talk about the 50/30/20 budget. I think that's a great framework, but really the framework that I use is just be clear on what you need for your future. And that if you're younger, what that means is like what you need to contribute and invest on a monthly basis. If you're a little bit older, that may be thinking about what your financial independence or like retirement number is, whatever that number is, you should know that number. And then understand like whether where you're at right now is going to take you there. And if it is, give yourself permission to enjoy yourself a little bit. And if it's not, you make the adjustments, but you should still be enjoying yourself along the way. Okay, I'm done now. um, okay, so I would say, and I was just gonna offer to y'all, if y'all need help with your wealth and finances and figuring out what's enough, I'd be honored to have a conversation with you. Let me know. I included my link here. At the very least, I would love to stay connected with y'all on social. I publish a lot of content. I feel like as much as my job as a financial advisor, my job is also creating content so that I can share that information with you all too. Okay, I have some questions. Al, what tools do you recommend for cash flow planning and budgeting? I love this tool called Monarch Money. It is a really solid tool. You do have to pay for it, but I think it's something like $99 for the year, so it's really affordable. And it yes, the links are not active, Al. Actually, you're right. They are I'll give Dana this presentation, but I can drop them in the chat. Um Monarch Money is the tool that I really love for budgeting and for like tracking your net worth. It's an incredible tool. You can link all your accounts there. It has like a more proactive kind of AI feature where it'll categorize, like automatically categorize your expenses. It'll create an automatic budget based on what your historical spending is. So, like if you link your credit cards and your bank accounts, it's going to say, hey, on average, you spend X amount on groceries or X amount on travel. And that way it'll give you a sense of like where you are based on reality. Because what a lot of us do is like we live in this fake ideal number when we want to be more mindful of our budget. And I'd much rather see you live in reality than than live in La La Land. That is an ideal situation, you know?
Very much
Okay.
so. I did have a question up here.
Tell me.
What is the difference between being a financial advisor and financial planner? I feel like
Ooh, that's a good one.
titles of things, right?
Okay, so listen, I think that that matters a little bit less. Well, actually, it doesn't. I think a financial planner, as a catch-all, is someone who is usually a CFP, so certified financial planner. And they are usually someone who has a fund, is not going to primarily be investment or product focus, right? So they're going to think about like what are the things that you want to achieve? What are the different pieces of your financial and personal life? And let's come up with a plan to get there. And then they're going to bring in the tools from their toolkit, whether that be certain types of investments, certain types of insurance that are going to allow you to achieve those goals. Whereas I think the tool and with the title, I actually use the title financial advisor, but I think a financial advisor can often be associated with people that work at like life insurance companies or work at so like a Northwestern Mutual. I mean, I'm gonna name names. Northwestern Mutual, Liberty Mutual, like those kind of places. And not to say that they're necessarily bad, but you just have to understand, always understand at the bottom, at the end of the day, the title doesn't matter as much, but you need to understand how they're compensated because that's really going to determine how they like the flavor and the shape of the advice that they're going to give you. And so not to say once again that they're going to necessarily give you bad advice, but if they're consistently steering you towards some sort of proprietary product that may want you just may want to think about like are they able to give me the most neutral advice or the most helpful advice for me. And that's on a personal kind of ethics thing, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I feel like we might need to have another talk.
I think you should, Dana.
Yeah, I
I
think
think
we'll have to have another one just about that. It's definitely
yeah,
on our list of things. But to your point, it's like, what's the underlying motivation of the sell versus the plan holistically that you kind of laid out tonight, right? What are all the things and all the questions people are asking you versus, hey, I think you need to have this shiny object over here, but it's like, why does the shiny object make sense? And sometimes people aren't able to articulate that well, and those are always
100%.
signs to just, we all have our own intuition, right?
For sure. And follow that, right? Like you
Yep.
have to follow that. And I think that if you don't feel comfortable, this is not the question you asked, Dana, but like if you don't feel comfortable with the recommendations that the professional you have in front of you, whatever they call themselves, is giving you, then that is a red flag. And that is a sign for you to either ask more questions or and make sure that your concerns and your doubts are heard. And if they're not open to that, or they continue to like bang on about the same product or service or whatever it is, then that also should give you pause.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I know we're coming up on time, but I loved what you said um, earlier about the house versus the investments, right? I feel like
Mm.
that's how we're trained on at least years ago when probably both you and I were growing up, right? You
Yeah,
go to school, get a job, and you buy this
100%.
thing, right? Go buy this
Yeah.
house, and that
Yeah.
you have made it in life.
Yes.
At some point along the way, I think the Jaguar was like the,
The
the
Jaguar was one until they changed their logo. Now nobody wants a Jaguar.
yeah, we won't go there. That was like the other signature of like, oh,
Yeah, for sure.
right. But I like how you talked about now that things are changing, right? Not everyone is looking to just go buy a house. They don't necessarily want to be tied down. Just work in general is changing and people want to have this
Mhm.
flexible lifestyle. So maybe talk a little bit more about how people start to manage, the life that they're currently in versus like what people might be pushing them
Mm,
even with, gig economy workers, creatives, digital
yeah,
nomads, like, there's so many things that we just don't want to be tied to, but have
yeah,
been told to do this thing, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So I will say, Dana, that like I'm the type of person that ever since I was little, I was like, I'm gonna do what I want. So I will say, take this with a caveat, a little sprinkle of salt. But I think at the end of the day, it just really requires you to tune into yourself and to ask yourself what you want. I recently had a client situation where, she's getting married, so she's engaged, and her and her fiance don't really want a big wedding. Like they just bought a house and they'd much rather spend the money on renovating the house and like making it their forever home and building their wealth now that they're together. And but their families are pushing them and pushing hard and giving them so much flack about not having a big wedding because they both come from really big families and they want to invite every cousin, every auntie, everybody in the world. And she was
Like
really
all those
struggling with that.
plates.
Exactly, exactly. She was really struggling with it. And she's like, I don't know what to do. And I said, what you need to do is take a step away from family. And not to say you don't have to talk to them, but if they bring up the wedding, say, I'm not going to talk about, like draw a boundary and say, I don't want to talk about it. Right. And give yourself some time to say, what do I actually want? And I think one of our biggest things in life is like a lot of us move through on autopilot and we don't spend enough time with ourselves to really know what we want. So like be very intentional about that. And I think that, from my own story, I was running on autopilot for a lot. And the reason I'm here now is because I went on a retreat, a yoga and meditation retreat for like 3 days in 2018. And I was like, wow, I've made it. I have the office, I have the house, I have the 2 kids and a great husband. I've made it, but I'm really unhappy and I'm not able to show up well. And it took me taking that step away and also understanding myself and like having that self-awareness to say, like, I haven't been living right. And I think more of us need to do that. So do that and because I think when you're really tuned into yourself and what you want and you're solid in that, when other people come to you with that, with like, oh, you should do this or why are you doing that? You're just like, no, thank you. Like if you just ate dinner, Dana, and I handed you a third plate, you'd be like, no, I'm good. Like I'm full. I don't want it. And it's not a conflict. It's not a issue. It's just like, no, I'm okay.
Mhm.
It's the same with life.
Absolutely. Now, if it's jerk chicken wings, I'm probably gonna.
I mean, there are certain things I want to go overboard with. You know what I mean? Like there are certain things I have a hard time saying no to. I feel you.
No, but no, absolutely. And I think that's, the biggest thing, right? Is like having those boundaries, especially when it comes to our financial boundaries. We put up boundaries in other aspects of our lives, but sometimes with money, that's where we have the biggest push and pull. So I definitely appreciate you kind of digging deeper in that. And I feel
Thank
like
you.
there's so much more. So I have to make sure that we have you back on a lot of these things. I
Yes.
know that we will, Anna. So thank you for
Thank
showing
you.
up and giving all of these gems that you dropped. Please make sure that you all connect with Anna, reach out if you have more questions, schedule time. This is the time either if you're just starting out or you just need a second look or just kind of want to have an initial conversation. You want to make sure that you're having those with experienced professionals who are also duly licensed as experts with
Yes,
experience.
that part.
All of that, right? And that's really exactly why we started Chip. So make sure you come to our platform, find other professionals who are going to help you get those needs and get those things done and do all the things that Anna spoke about today. So don't be shy. Make sure you reach out. Anna, thanks again for your time and thanks for everyone for showing up. We'll make sure you all get access to this recording and we'll have more of the financial services series soon.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.